April 6, 1978. Scotland, Hogwarts. Sergei forced himself to take a deep breath, exhale, and at least pretend to relax. Peter was a rather complex and suspicious guy, and Sergei didn't want to scare him or throw him off track at such a crucial moment.
I didn't want to keep an eye on them.
Pettigrew began, rubbing his thin, slightly protruding nose.
It's just, well, as a precaution. I heard some things about Director Dumbledore and wanted to make sure everything was okay since he didn't summon James to his tower until so late. And he's an orphan now, even though he's of age.
What are you talking about? Sergei asked, surprised by Peter's blushing cheeks, even though he had just reminded himself not to interrupt or derail the guy's thoughts.
Well, there are rumors about the director.
Peter evasively replied, his ears turning bright red.
That he, well, you know, doesn't have a wife. And he doesn't date women.
Well, he's old, Sergei said, widening his eyes.
Well, he still doesn't have a wife, and he never did. My mom, well, warned me about it. It's just that in our circles, well, there are all kinds of deviants.
Sirius's memories of Director Dumbledore were exclusively positive. The old man practically gushed with nostalgia in those memories. And Sergei himself liked the image of the Hogwarts headmaster, who, in his embroidered robes and unusual hats, resembled a wizard from children's fairy tales. Over the past 2 years in the magical world, they had hardly interacted. There were no complaints or reprimands for Sergei, so why would they meet elsewhere if not in the Great Hall? Peter's hints were more than transparent, and children in orphanages usually fell into the so-called at-risk group. They often received lectures from caregivers and visiting uncles from the authorities, and only someone completely blind and deaf wouldn't know about Chikatilo and the like. Many of these sick individuals found their way to work closer to children, some harmless, some not. But Sergei hadn't noticed anything like that about Dumbledore, even with his orphan past. Lady Wahlberger disapproved of the director, but more for the decline in discipline at the school than for any potential inclinations.
I don't want to say anything about the director in that sense, but, well, I went and hid in that room in advance.
Pettigrew concluded, and Sergei simply nodded. If a person wants to justify their curiosity, then let them. So what did you hear? He asked. Peter fell into thought again, so Sergei had to nudge him a bit.
They were talking about James's parents. At first, I didn't quite understand because I thought they died last summer. But it turns out they weren't his real parents, they were his aunt and uncle. His real parents died a few months ago in Cyprus, and they were also killed. Then Director Dumbledore started asking James about the death of his not real parents. He said he wanted to look into something and needed to see his memories. James had a mental block, though, placed by his real father. And he remembered everything.
What did he remember? A sense of unease settled in Sergei's heart.
James. Well, he began to remember, and explained that he had argued with his aunt. She used to be a black. It was because of Lily Evans. This aunt used to visit Lily's parents and didn't want James to date her. Something about him having a fiancée. But James, he got angry with her. He said he didn't want it and that it happened accidentally. That she wanted to punish him somehow, and he wanted to grab her wand. They struggled, and magic went haywire, and then there was a flash, and his aunt just went limp and stopped breathing. James got scared, and he went to his mother. Then they went together to James's real father. And it turns out, his uncle had already found his wife, the one who died, and informed the blacks. And he performed a ritual. Probably the one you told me about, and found out that James did it. So his mother, she killed that uncle to cover the tracks. And James's father, he erased his memory and did everything by inheritance. And they ran away to divert suspicion from James. I think that ritual can only be done once, and that uncle wasn't killed by James, he's clean now. He's already of age. And the director said that James must seek revenge and help him destroy such a terrible dark family that places their rules above state laws. And that the blacks, they hinder, a bright future.
What? Surprised by the familiar phrasing, Sergei asked again.
Well,
Peter rubbed his wrinkled forehead.
Dumbledore said that wizards should strive for progress, and these dark families are holding him back. They're trying to impose their opinion on everyone through terror. And among wizards, there are more and more Muggleborns who also want to enter the magical community, but they aren't allowed. And they can bring a lot of new, bright, good things. Progress. And that eventually everyone should come to the point where magic enters every home, and the secrecy statute can be lifted, which was introduced only so that the aristocrats could enjoy their power in a narrow circle of those initiated into the secret. I didn't remember everything well. He said a lot and gave examples.
I understand what's meant, Sergei nodded in astonishment, realizing that he seemed to have arrived in this time in magical Britain not just on the brink of a civil war but on the brink of the 17th year war between the Reds and the Whites. And, if he recalled the history of the aristocracy and the intelligentsia, after this war, only the craftiest, Grandfather Lenin, remained, and all the aristocracy, even those who switched to the red side, somehow quickly disappeared or were at best exiled. But Britain wasn't Russia. Here, there were plenty of pureblood families, and there was no one to exile. And in light of the fact that the Black family was the oldest and most noble in the local hierarchy, practically equivalent to the Muggle royal dynasty.
I also remembered that James asked why the Black specifically. And the director said that nothing happens in Britain without your approval. Even the war. And that James, as a good friend, should save you from your dark family. But for some reason, I thought that you, wouldn't really want to be saved.
And what did James say? Sergei asked, though the answer was quite obvious. James had been caught in a tight spot, and he couldn't assert himself or exercise his rights now. He was an orphan, without parents, and he was hanging on by a thread with the unintentional killing, and one word from the director.
He agreed.
Peter concluded flatly.
But the director dug around in his head again. He said that James wouldn't exactly remember this conversation but would remember what to do and whom to listen to. For discretion. So that the Blacks or someone else couldn't dig it up. And that it was for the greater good. And also that after graduation, all four of us would have the honor to serve, to join the Order of the Phoenix.
Order of the Phoenix. Sergei repeated, and before his eyes, scenes from history flashed, something that hadn't been with him for quite some time. Sirius had indeed joined such a secret organization, where there were many young men and women, and many of them later died. And if you remembered the names and associated them with pureblood families, it became interesting. Pruitts, McKinnons, Boneses, Longbottoms. Considering that Regulus also suddenly joined another secret organization, like many of his classmates and people from Slytherin. They all killed each other or perished in the Civil War, and Sirius himself somehow ended up in prison. Generals remain, while foot soldiers replace each other. And it seemed that after Harry, Sirius's godson, and the son of James and Lily, grew up, there would be a second war of destruction. Sergei grew up in Soviet times when the Civil War, with the victory of the workers and peasants over the capitalists, was considered right and normal. The truth was also that the bright future never materialized. The USSR collapsed, and during the perestroika period, various exposures and revelations began. There were definitely no right-wingers, there weren't and couldn't be any, and now he himself and his family belonged to the highest aristocratic society. His task and ticket to saving his own family was to save the current one. Perhaps the wizard aristocrats couldn't even imagine that someday someone would come along who not only wasn't satisfied with the established order of things, but who would be able to take it all away and redistribute it. And the knowledge of the family accumulated over centuries would become obscurantism and the opium of the people. Now, even at Hogwarts, Some subjects had been abolished so that Muggle-borns could better understand the material and not lag behind. So it turned out that people like Sirius and James were almost crazy with boredom until their 4th year, as they already knew almost everything they were taught at school. And when a person idles, it usually doesn't lead to anything good. Take, for example, what happened to Doria Black. And Doria considered James her son, but a spoiled brat who thought he could do whatever he wanted eventually becomes a despot and tyrant and can't forgive any restrictions. Sergei believed that James didn't want Doria's death, it happened accidentally, but the whole situation, including the hasty departure of Phineas and Euphemia Potter, became clear now.
Do you believe me?
Peter broke the silence, interrupting Sergei's frantic thoughts. Yes, I believe you, Sergei replied. We'll figure something out. This is very serious. Thank you for telling me. I think I should try to create a consciousness protection amulet for you, Peter. When I was working on the motorcycle, I saw it in books. It'll be a simple one for now, and try not to get caught by the old man. I won't forget this. I'm serious.
Well, you're my friend, Sirius.
Peter shyly smiled. Sergei nodded, already starting to think about what and how to write to his mother and how to send the message without it being intercepted. Remember the story about Lenin in the prison, who wrote to Krupskaya using milk on book pages? However, when his racing thoughts and heart calmed down, Sergei remembered that he wasn't the first Black who needed to hide a message, and he, after all, was also a wizard. We'll get through this, Peter, we'll get through this, Sergei promised his slightly bewildered friend. He had often wondered how this talented, intelligent, quiet, and shy guy could become a traitor. What drove him to it? But he had always suspected that two things were to blame, Sirius's own attitude and some life circumstances. Perhaps, in the past, Peter had simply chosen another friend instead of Sirius, especially since Sirius himself didn't care about his family.
July 3, 1978. England, London, Black House. Regulus never thought he would live to see this day. He never imagined he'd be at the center of a family scandal, rather than his older brother Sirius. Over the past 2 years, they had become great friends, just like they were in their childhood. Even at Hogwarts, Sirius always managed to talk to him, teach him, and go to Hogsmeade together, as if trying to make up for all the years of enmity and misunderstanding. The past 2 years had been wonderful, and it was a shame that Sirius had finished Hogwarts just a few days ago, and there would be no more of these times. But that wasn't a reason to. Regulus sighed, trying to deal with his conflicted emotions. He felt ashamed for losing control, yelling at his mother, and being rude to his brother, but what they were proposing. Regulus didn't want to leave Hogwarts, just having completed his 5th year. He couldn't. He didn't want to abandon Barty either, who was increasingly targeted by fellow students because of Mr. Crouch's politics. Barty's father had become the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement last year. Barty was his best friend, and long ago, Regulus had sworn to protect and cherish their friendship. He sighed and turned onto his other side. This was not how he had imagined his summer holiday, which had just begun yesterday. On Saturday evening, they had taken the train together with his brother. Sirius could apparate directly from Hogsmeade to London, but chose not to do so, instead joining Regulus and Barty in their compartment. Regulus felt even more ashamed as he recalled this memory.
Well, it's time to keep my promise,
Sirius said in the compartment, taking out his guitar from his pocket and enlarging it. Regulus remembered that his brother had bought this instrument a long time ago, back when they still went together to the Muggle store to buy everything they needed for renovating Sirius's room. Sirius had said he had dreamed of having a guitar all his life. Sometimes Regulus would catch glimpses of him strumming on it, jotting down strange symbols and lyrics in a thick notebook, but he always stopped when others were around. Perhaps he was embarrassed. At least, Regulus had managed to secure a promise that he would be the first to hear these songs. And now that time had come, and his brother had arranged a real concert for them, which eventually drew almost half of the senior students from Hogwarts who were traveling on the train. There were about a dozen songs, and each of them was sung about 10 times until Sirius was hoarse. Regulus couldn't understand if these were Sirius's lyrics or some Muggle tunes, but the songs were about not fighting but loving girls and their loved ones. They were about magic, about war, even about school. One song, which Sirius sang more frequently than others and which he sang at the end of the concert, still echoed in Regulus's ears. The songs were good, touching, thought-provoking, and they were easy to remember. It seemed like this concert and the songs were Sirius's farewell gift to Hogwarts. Regulus thought that they might even become popular and be sung in common rooms. But then, when they arrived home, Sirius announced that he was going to Europe to study under a master artificer. He claimed that the gift he had was rare and deserved to be honed. Their mother insisted on it. Regulus understood that, but what happened next, he did not expect. Both his mother and Sirius announced that they wanted Regulus to transfer from Hogwarts to either Beauxbatons or Durmstrang to finish his senior years since he was proficient in both French and German. They argued that it was time for him to choose. Regulus was furious that they had decided for him without asking if he wanted to leave school, his friend, familiar teachers, and his fellow students.
Hey, Reg, are you still sulking?
Sirius knocked on the door and then brazenly dispelled the protective spells to enter the room. Regulus glanced at his brother and transformed into a cat, signaling that he wasn't in the mood to talk. Sirius seemed to welcome this, and he shamelessly scooped him up and placed him on his lap, sitting down in his favorite armchair.
You stubborn yellow-eyed feline. What's gotten into you, brother?
Sirius leaned over him, cradling him like a baby and scratching behind his ear. Regulus retaliated by digging his claws into Sirius's hand, which made Sirius yelp and give him a reproachful look.
I wanted to tell you everything at Hogwarts, but it was too dangerous. The walls have ears, and the fewer people who know. I was just trying to protect you. I'm sorry. I know you're almost an adult, you'll be 17 in the winter. Don't repeat my mistakes. In our family, you're the good one, and I'm the troublesome and capricious one, remember that.
Sirius poked him in the nose.
You look too cute in this form, turn back, I can't have a serious conversation with you like this.
Regulus snorted but didn't rush to change back into human form. If Sirius was leaving, when else would he get such good ear scritches? Sirius understood this and gave him a sly smile.
All right, I get it, you can't butter up with apologies.
And he resumed petting and scratching.
Yeah. It's amazing how little it takes for a person to be happy.
Sirius chuckled as he watched Regulus, who was smiling while lounging on the bed. You wouldn't understand, you're not a cat. It's just so enjoyable. Mom can't do it like this, and it's as if you know some secret.
I've always liked cats.
Sirius shrugged.
So, are you ready to hear my thoughts?
Yes, Regulus sighed.
Well. After the Easter holidays, when we returned to Hogwarts, I learned something very important. Turns out, our family is causing quite a nuisance for Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster.
Dumbledore? Regulus raised an eyebrow, trying to make sense of what his brother was saying. But...
Yes, it's hard to believe, isn't it? But the truth is stranger than fiction. I've just finished Hogwarts, but you're staying there for another 2 years. And, you know, I really don't want you to stay there. I have a very bad feeling about it. A very bad feeling. I won't forgive myself if anything happens to you, Reg. If you get involved in... Well, you know. You can't underestimate the headmaster. I managed to pass everything on to Mom, she conducted an investigation. Andromeda's situation didn't just resolve itself by chance. And then there's the story of Molly Pruitt, who married a Weasley even before Andromeda's situation. And a few other girls from old families. He's very slowly but systematically destroying magical bloodlines. through their children. And this war he's dragging Hogwarts graduates into. The rivalry between the houses is escalating for a reason. James spent almost 3 months convincing me to join the Order of the Phoenix to fight against the Dark Lord.
Order of the Phoenix? Regulus inquired.
Yes, it's something like a resistance movement. For Dumbledore. James persuaded everyone to join, Remus, Peter, and a couple from our house. James also wants to attend the Auror Academy, so to speak, to infiltrate.
Sounds like the Muggle detectives that Barty reads about. Regulus rubbed his temple.
Well, yes, something like that. Except when the grinder starts churning and things get messy, it'll be hard to get out alive. That's why I'm asking you. Don't go back to Hogwarts. For my sake.
But what about Barty? Regulus asked. He's my friend. And he's already facing harassment at school because of his father's politics.
Maybe the two of you can transfer together somewhere else? Talk to him about it. Another country. It's a chance for different knowledge, and you both love to learn. Mr. Crouch mentioned that he's aiming for the Minister of Magic position. Although it might just be rumors for now. Minister Millicent Bagnold is struggling with this so-called war, the disappearances, and deaths, as well as with her own employees, so in 2 years, she might either be ousted from her position or released early. Dad says it's not certain that Crouch will achieve the minister's chair in a couple of years, but he's aiming high right from the start. That's why many Slytherins aren't happy. Their parents are starting to get pressured. Maybe by the next election, Crouch will have gathered enough political influence. He's a pureblood with modern views, which appeals to the people, especially given all these unexplained incidents, disappearances, and deaths.
Yes. Barty mentioned that his father is completely focused on his career and hardly pays any attention to him. So, you're not planning to join this Order of the Phoenix?
I pretended to agree. But circumstances are above me. I'll be heading to Europe right after one thing and after this wedding on the 5th of July, which Lily Evans invited me to with James. Her sister is getting married. It's just strange that the wedding is on a Wednesday.
What's so strange about that? It's a tradition, Regulus said, surprised.
Really? I just forgot. Somehow, I remembered that weddings were held on Fridays. Anyway, I have to go now. I promised Pete that I'd help with something today.
Regulus watched his brother leave and contemplated his next steps, humming the most memorable song from Sirius's repertoire to himself.
Please don't judge harshly. I tried to translate the song into English and sing it. You can evaluate the result, but there is nothing more of the story in this part.
More than 1,000 years ago, the founders gathered here, we know. They changed the law for life's design to grant the generation time for fledglings to soar from their nest. Forget the blood and the royal crest. What matters most is the reach for stars. Brave, clever, and nimble who they are, to fly beneath the stars' bright light, the one named sun, so high and bright. A grey stone on a grey hillside, in the black like a frozen tide. They told us no more wars to wage, taught us to step onto the stage. But over Hogwarts clouds no loom, obscuring the heavenly room. Above Hogwarts greyish haze, 1,000 years through its own maze. Life beneath the stars' bright gleam, the one named sun, our timeless dream. thousand years we fight a battle with no true insight. Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, Gryffindor or Slytherin tough, Crimson Bloods, it all runs the same. In Earth's interest, a lifeless claim. It withers under the stars' warm light. The one named sun shining so bright. We don't recall if it was always so. Who invented this endless woe? Who said this is your enemy? Kill without asking, set them free. I can't remember who taught us to hate, with all our hearts to discriminate. A flag so empty placed in our hand, sent us to battle in the sunless land. To fall and never see the star, the one named sun from near or far. More than 1,000 years ago, the founders gathered this we know. They changed the love of life design to grant the generation time for fledglings to soar from their nest. Forget the blood and the royal crest. What matters most is they reach for stars, not consumed in the war's cruel bars. To life beneath the stars' bright light, the one named sun forever inside.